welcome to Fort Mill Business Today. I'm Patti Mercer, along with Fort Mill's Mayor Guynn Savage and Shaw Kuester, Chairman of the Fort Mill Economic Council. Welcome both of you to Fort Mill Business Today and this opportunity to really share with our viewers the hot topics affecting Fort Mill right now. And I think historic downtowns, revitalization, the Fort Mill redevelopment projects, it's got to be at the top of the list. Mayor Savage, why don't we begin with you? Give us an up-to-date on what's going on.
Well, I think for me as a long-term resident of Fort Mill, it's very sweet to see the type of vibrancy that's being created in the downtown district. Once as a child, you could go to downtown Fort Mill and see a movie, go to a drugstore, go to a grocery store, buy an outfit for school. You could do anything you wanted. But then we had a pretty long dry spell. I'd like to thank the businesses that made it through that long dry spell, but I'd especially like to highlight on those that are continuing to add and invest to our downtown district. And there are too many for me to just reel off. So if you will, I think it's interesting for most that we have 3 businesses downtown that are world renowned. We have the Pucker Butts, which actually holds a world record for the hottest pepper. We have the Hanauer Bow Tie Company that are absolutely sought after, made in America. And then the Bugle and Drum Corps, the Crown
Yes,
group,
Carolina Crown.
won the world championship. So right here on a very short stretch, we have 3 businesses that are world renowned. And then when you add that to the nice compliments to local dish that has been sustaining a great marketability for good food, we've got Hobo's and Z Bakery adding to that. We've had a redesign of crossings to bring some very high quality merchandising to the downtown area. We've got Main and Gray that's just gorgeous.
Just
Lisa
first
B's
class all the way.
Boutique.
Yes.
You know, we have a lot of new businesses that we are just thrilled to have. Katie Baby.
Katie Baby.
I mean, look what a gorgeous building. And then you look at the History Museum moving to the head of Main Street with their programs and the things that they can help people know about the town. And then the Community Playhouse. You have something to do on Main Street periodically. I think it's important to recognize just in 2016 alone, we welcomed the Loom, Jennifer Belk's company, for shared office space, a concept that's just really exciting.
Right.
Olive's Mud Puddle, the art place at the top of Main, has determined they're going to add a coffee shop in the front. I think that's just interesting. A comic book store is opening beside of Subway, and then the old theater renovation, near and dear to my heart, and to the fine work of Shaw and his group and Chip Smith. We're going to see some really wonderful changes taking place at the foot of Main.
And with those changes, of course, Shaw, Kuester Commercial, you are very much involved in the next phase of this redevelopment opportunity in Fort Mill. Tell us about that.
A lot of it has started with the Fort Mill Economic Council, just by getting to know the folks on there and people that are part of the history of Fort Mill, as well as the current business climate of what we have now, whether it's bankers, whether it's architects, whether it's attorneys, from anything from that standpoint. We've all come together in one way, shape, or form. I'm just one of a couple in the group here, 10 to 12 approximately. That have come together to work on the theater or to other projects down here. And so I'm happy to be a part of it. It's exciting to be a part of it. Without having the mayor's support or the town itself or these other partners, whether it's Economic Council or its financial partners, it wouldn't be possible without everybody coming together on this. You couldn't do it alone.
One word I hear both of you use is history. And I think for those of us who hold Fort Mill very near and dear to our hearts, whether we, grew up here or moved and just fell in love with the area, preserving history and then making way for new opportunities, because those new opportunities represent hospitality dollars, tax dollars, and they are a foundation of having a nice, balanced community, place to call home. In terms of preserving history as we move forward, what can we expect to see?
I think it's important that the town hosts a historic review board, and there are many people that sit on this board and look for proposed changes to ensure that they remain true to the historic symbolic pieces of Fort Mill that we would like to preserve. I think that with traffic, certainly we're seeing a lot more people downtown than we have in quite a number of
More
years.
foot traffic too, which
A
is
lot
pretty
more
cool.
foot traffic. It is wonderful, just wonderful. And I think with what Shaw and the Economic Development Group are planning and bringing to Fort Mill, we're going to see even more of that. So I think that we will look to our planning department, our historic review board, and determine what's the best path to not thwart the process, but to keep it in a manner and a vision aesthetically that is in keeping with that historic value that we all have.
And I think that's just awesome to know that the exterior especially will be preserved. Now, one of the projects that you're involved with, Shaw, is the theater.
Yes.
What used to be what, the center?
The old Center Theater.
The old
Yes.
Center Theater. And there was a lot of history made in that theater. It experienced what, 3 fires?
I only know of 2, but,
Of 2?
but you may know more than I do. I'm only local out of Charlotte. I'm not local down here, so.
Well, okay.
yeah.
Well, I know a lot of people really were hoping to have a movie theater to go to, and yet, given the history of the building itself, that was not really possible. So, what can we expect from that property?
You were right that the fact that had it not burned down and it stayed a theater, it would have had no issues becoming a theater, staying a theater.
It could have been, yeah, a great venue.
But moving it to the 2016 standards was nearly impossible. So Chip Smith, who's the owner, who's been the owner for quite some time, had EW Process there for many years. We spoke to him it's been about a year ago, along with other Economic Council members, and he wanted to hold on to it, but he wanted to renovate it. He wanted to be a part of it, which was exciting because he's from here, and he wanted to be a part of that history that was going to bring it back. So what we decided on doing was to take the theater portion, which is on Academy Street, which is about 4,000 square feet, and renovate it into 2 stories worth of office. Keep the brick exposed, open up the ceiling to where you have the rafters, give a look that's not here in Fort Mill today, which you think it would be, but it's not. The front section, which was the old concession section, which is, you actually have the old concession window still in the wall, which is amazing. It's still there.
Can you keep it?
We're going to try to keep it.
Oh,
yeah,
good.
we're going to try to keep it.
Good.
But we're also going to bring back an old marquee sign that's going to
For
be on
the
the front.
exterior?
For the front of it, yes. Yeah.
That's going to look great.
So unfortunately, we couldn't find the original one. It disappeared some years ago from when I was told. But they're going to recreate that. That'll go along Main Street, which will be exciting to have that
Yes.
too. The front part where the concession area used to be is where that's going to be retail, probably light fare, not quite a restaurant, I don't want to say a restaurant, but probably bakery, gelato, wine. And we have 1 or 2 folks that are coming to us right now with their final renderings, and along with Katie Baby and Lisa B's and Crossings, would be an exciting use right there between all those stores. It'd be very nice.
Very
so that's what's going on now.
complementary
Yes.
to each other. Now, with all this redevelopment, we're still looking at parking. Where do we stand with that, Mayor Savage?
We certainly recognize the need for parking, and it's a problem that every community would love to have.
Absolutely.
That we have more
I think
people
that's
than we
important.
have places to park them. And I think we've had a long-standing, wonderful relationship with the Baptist Church, where people can park in their large parking lot and walk to Main Street. We need to acquire some signage to make sure that folks that are new to Fort Mill know that it exists. But we're also looking at the foot of Main, because we're going to have employees working out of the theater group. We have people that are trying to find a parking place to get in the restaurants. So we're looking at the property at the foot of Main, beside of the Veterans Memorial. And in addition to just putting parking there, we're looking, and council approved on Saturday, for us to move forward with the conceptual planning of a permanent farmers market, a very nice upscale farmers market with a section of it that will be enclosed, or the opportunity to enclose it all and rent it out for community space as well. And we'd like to keep it thematically going along with the caboose and the railroad, and looked at some concepts that looked like the old depot.
Yes.
So we would like gas lanterns and really upscale with the rafters and the brick. It will be beautiful.
And two, an opportunity to keep things local. You know, Carolina certified right here, to know that you are really enjoying the area where you're visiting or where you live. It's so important. I think when we look at revitalizing Main Street, we've wanted to do that for a long time. Everyone seems to have a real heart for Main Street. When we look at developments like Kingsley, and we see the big companies coming, Lash, LPL, and trees going bye-bye. That is still help us understand why that's good for Fort Mill.
It's good for Fort Mill because for a very long period of time, we had no employment. We had the best educational system in the world and great people, but they were driving back and forth to acquire employment in Charlotte and other surrounding areas. So for them to be able to actually find not just employment, but good employment here in town, it contains some of that traffic. There will actually be some executive apartments in Kingsley to house. That was one of the requirements for LP&L. They wanted their employees to have the option to live in a campus setting, if you will, and ride a bike or walk to work. So for me, the thought that my children and my grandchildren might actually not have to drive up and down a major highway to get to work, that they can actually be gainfully employed in the community that they live and play in, is very important.
True, and we're hearing mixed use. When we talk about being a bedroom community, what's wrong with that? Why can't we just be a bedroom community? From a tax perspective, what does that look like?
Unfortunately, residential taxes very rarely pay for all the services that we're committed to provide. It's kind of a vicious cycle, if you will, because we have to have rooftops to acquire the businesses that pay the better
chicken and the egg.
Commercial taxes that help us continue the excellent services that everyone has come to enjoy. So it's a balancing act, if you will. We're looking to supplement the wonderful housing that we do have. We have a great community, but we need to have those businesses both for quality of life as well. I mean, how many people want to take their kids to a ball game and then have to travel outside of Fort Mill to go to a restaurant to get a hamburger or a milkshake? Nobody. We want to
Absolutely.
keep our money in our community, and we want to welcome business with open arms.
Now, obviously, you understand this balance of a destination location, Shaw. So, when you decided that the greens, that what Fort Mill needed were apartments. If you wanted to increase foot traffic on Main Street, you needed a place where people could just walk and be accessible to those establishments. How long has it been now? A year and a half, 2 years?
It's been 2 years.
2 years.
You can't believe that, since it's opened.
Unbelievable.
It's amazing.
And it looks like you're pretty much
It,
up to capacity.
It's been great. It's been fantastic. People love being there, and what we thought was going to happen is happening. People want to live there, but then they go and they'll walk down and they want to enjoy the amenities that are here now and that are hopefully coming here soon. The parks are nearby, getting out on a bike to go take a bike ride or going to jog to the peach stand and back. We have some employees that live there and they go do that on a daily basis. So that's exactly, and you're only running up to where Kingsley is. Right. So you could almost ride your bike to Kingsley if you lived here. So what the mayor was saying is true. You're so close to everything, you almost don't have to get in your car anymore, which is so exciting. That's the best thing for everybody, is to not.
Well, it really is, because that really decreases the amount of impact on our roads. It really promotes a quality of life with the Greenway, the 2,100 acres of just preserved and natural setting, and knowing that businesses are choosing Fort Mill because of the quality of life. And I think those that live here that love the quality of life are a little bit protective. It's like we just sometimes want to put up a sign and say, oh, go somewhere else. That's really not the best approach, and it's not called Southern hospitality. But from a financial standpoint, all of us benefit by having a balanced, what would you say, between residential, commercial, light industrial, even the apartments. You pay a pretty good tax base.
You do.
When it comes to rental properties.
You pay to play.
Mayor Savage, you mentioned with Kingsley, it's an opportunity to provide really great jobs for Fort Mill residents. Now, when we look at Main Street, Fort Mill, we're not necessarily talking about a high quantity of jobs.
No, we actually were very fortunate to get the engineering firm to go in the old research and development center at the intersection of White Street and Claiborne. Those folks do walk downtown and come for lunch and experience the downtown. And we're not looking to compete with Market Street in Baxter or with Kingsley in any sense of the word. We are a niche community of smaller, quaint, interesting places on Main Street, and so that the town can assist a little with that momentum that seems to be happening along Main Street. We've done two things that I think are very important. We've passed an amendment to the Bailey Bill, and you say, what's the Bailey Bill? It's an opportunity for a business owner or someone that wants to buy into Main Street to be assessed at a certain tax level before they make improvements to the building, and to stay at that tax level for a period of time, enabling them to make their investments and move forward with an incentive, so to speak, so that they can come along on Main Street. Very important, and I think probably you folks may be using
Yes.
that with the theater.
The theater group did do that, and I think the other folks here on Main Street 202 are also going to do that. So it's been a big help from that standpoint.
And it's great because it does encourage those niche businesses, those unique and very valuable places that draw people from other locations to come to Fort Mill because it's the only place that you can find it, which is so great. How many times do you go out of town traveling and you hit an intersection, it's the same formula of fast foods, and to know that Fort Mill is unique and growing and being, some incentives are being provided.
Another one
amazing.
would be in the event that we have businesses on Main Street that are interested in improving their facade, the exterior of their building. Council recently kind of balanced that as well by creating a grant program. You can get up to $5,000 in matching grant money from the town for improvements on your facade. So we've put $15,000 into that grant fund for this year, this coming year, so we could do either 3 $5,000 ones, or if somebody merely wanted to upgrade with paint and a new facade improvement, it could be $2,000, but they have to match. So it's encouragement to continue making that investment, but that we could help it along.
It's not a handout, it's a hand up.
Correct.
And is it also very important that they stay within the guidelines of
Absolutely.
the historical preservation of Fort Mill?
Everything still has to be approved
Yes.
so that it is correct in the vision and the historic preservation that we intend to do.
How have you, you know, people, when you're out and about in the community, which you're very involved and we appreciate that so much, in casual conversation, what are you hearing in Fort Mill about revitalization and the changes that are taking place?
Impatience.
Hurry up and get her done.
I think there are a lot of folks that are intrigued that we are seeing the type of sustained growth. You know, we've had businesses come and go over the period of years since the mills closed down and we no longer had the walking traffic that we did. We've seen a lot of businesses come and go. These businesses that have made the investment or stuck it out are here and have their doors open and are entertaining new clients every day, new customers every day. I think they are bringing a wealth of interest to our downtown area that is quite surprising for most of the community.
I think it's wonderful, and I think sometimes we forget how big of deal it is to be so conveniently located to an international airport. Shaw, if you would, speak from that perspective.
When we first, I can speak to my personal level, is when we moved our company down here in the late 90s, the big push was U.S. Airways. All of the pilots were living down in this area because it was so easy. It was actually easier for them to live here and drive to the airport than most places in Charlotte. That was big. That was very big. At the same time, from a macro scale, the reason why we're seeing so much growth here is because, especially in South Carolina, is because it's so easy for them to have access to the international airport in Charlotte. And you're seeing that literally all the way from Charleston with the harbor they're constructing up to 26 and then up to 277 from Columbia. So you're seeing a major artery connect from Charlotte all the way down to Charleston, and a lot of it is either because of the harbor or it's because of the U.S. The national airport, the international airport.
Absolutely.
That standpoint.
You're moving things along, and it is also part of this global outreach. And I just, again, Fort Mill is doing a great job of balancing, accommodating growth, and hey, you know, life, what do they say? The only thing constant is change. My question too is, when it comes to Fort Mill, growth, it is a good problem to have. It's not like you're actively pursuing it, you're managing it. There is a difference. So tell me how Fort Mill is managing their growth, specifically as it relates to the Spratt property.
I'm laughing because I have a phrase that I use quite often on a work day. It's we're drinking water out of a fire hose on a regular basis. You know, I think it's very, very important that we all remember that we're not the only community around Charlotte that's growing. Every community in the peripheral circle around the airport, the interstate corridor, the banking business, everything is here that makes it ripe for business to occur, and people follow those businesses for those jobs. So you're right, it is a balancing act. The Spratt property, and again, timing means everything. The Spratt property is a unique piece of property. It is a gateway into this community. It actually holds the birthplace of Fort Mill itself.
And for maybe those that are not familiar with where the Spratt property is, can you kind of give us a visual?
Sure.
Okay.
It's along the Catawba River on the south side of Fort Mill. You can get to this particular piece of property if you come off of the interstate down Sutton and get on 21 coming into town. It's all of the beautiful property to the right. And it travels 700-800 acres along the shoreline of the Catawba River. So the cemetery is there that houses the actual founders of Fort Mill from the Spratt family and the Kanawha family. So it is a very historically significant piece of property. And in Mr. Spratt's efforts to leave a legacy, he wanted the Fort Mill community that was created by his family to have access to that river. He did not want it to be closed off by any type of business corridor, which he's very business friendly, but he wanted the town and its people to have access, and he wanted the cemetery to be memorialized. So as a part of that development agreement, which are exceedingly important as we grow, we come together and we negotiate back and forth with our planning department and the council and all of the guidelines that are in place, and we come to a place that's mutually acceptable with a planning and development agreement. And in this one, you know, I'm certain I've heard a lot of folks that were concerned that it would include additional traffic or additional homes, but it also has a tremendous amount of commercial opportunity for that land. It has 63 acres that will be set aside that will be undisturbed along the Catawba, and it has 64 acres that they're donating to the community for recreation use and access to that river.
Which we've identified as a need within Fort Mill.
That property is currently being marketed. My hope is that they'll find someone that has a beautiful vision, maybe an equestrian themed community there, so that we can still see the horse barn and the horses that are there. But I feel certain with the national exposure that it's getting, that we're going to get a quality developer in there that's going to recognize Mr. Spratt's legacy, the history of Fort Mill, the gateway to the town, and what the townspeople really hope to have out of that.
Yes, and this was not something that you actively sought. The reality is this property is in demand, and the vultures were beginning to circle around, if you will, to see what was going to happen there. And there are different scenarios that could have transpired, from Rock Hill annexing. I mean, it's contiguous with water, so that could have been a possibility. York County having the managing rights of what to put on that property. And really, it seems to me, from my perspective, as residents of Fort Mill begin to understand what council was facing, the protesting and the outspoken ones began to quiet, because everyone understood somebody's going to get it. Why not us?
I think it's a legitimate concern of anyone that lives in Fort Mill to question, how are we going to manage the traffic? How are we going to manage the growth in the school district? How much is just enough? But I think the significance of the property and the legacy that Mr. Spratt wanted to leave behind, the access to the river, I think all of those things, when they came into the daylight, if you will, I think it became more of a, I'm not looking forward to more development, but this makes sense. I have had a lot of folks that spoke with that were very disturbed that we might be allowing that property to be developed. But the fact of the matter was it was going to be developed, whether it was with us or with someone else, and the opportunity to secure the things that Mr. Spratt wanted to give to the town, undeniably, we could not just let that go.
Well, absolutely, and you have to give him a lot of kudos for giving us the opportunity to move forward. As we work with developers, maybe growth is imminent, but there are things within those discussions that can be very beneficial to Fort Mill, such as donating space for parks and recreation, helping with roads by adding lanes and things like that. Shaw, in your experience with commercial development, is this usually how towns and commercial developers work together for the good of all?
There's always a win-win situation. We've said that before in the past. And given how Mr. Spratt has always been, and his family has always been such a big part of this area, given how Fort Mill is, the town of Fort Mill and its group here with the mayor and council has always been positive when it comes to smart growth. This was something that had to come together. And when you have that, it helps as a developer to come in and understand that you've got a town that wants to work with you, that they're going to have some demands, and you've got to understand those. Developers are going to have their own demands, and so you have to come together and get to the situation where it's going to benefit everybody. The Spratt property, given that it touches almost downtown Fort Mill and it goes all the way to the river, this is going to be, I think, one of the most amazing developments that we'll see in our next 10 to 20 years here. I think it'll be very exciting.
It's really going to change.
Yes.
And that time frame is terribly important. I thought one of the best parts of the development agreement was that they would not build it all at one time, that they would spread it in 5-year increments into a 20-year time frame. So we're not looking at a tremendous amount of influx all at one time. It will be a gradual change and shift, and I think that is much more agreeable to me personally.
Well, and two, we just finished the Fort Mill Parkway. It's kind of like, can't we just enjoy it before it gets crowded? I mean,
we're ready to widen it now.
Exactly. So that brings me to transportation projects. Fort Mill Parkway, Pennies for Progress has been an amazing thing for York County, Fort Mill to achieve within our own abilities some really great transportation improvements. Where are we with transportation in Fort Mill? Because that is the topic.
Actually, the Parkway opening has provided some relief on some of the secondary roads, such as Dobie's Bridge Road and others. We're seeing it do exactly what it was designed to do and channel some of that thoroughfare away from the center of town. And I think it's important to note that all the traffic that's in Fort Mill is not created by Fort Mill. We have a lot of people living in Indian Land, Lancaster, Rock Hill that must travel through Fort Mill to get to their jobs in Charlotte. So we're looking at a burgeoning base. As long as there are jobs in Charlotte, we're going to host a lot of those vehicles as they come through Fort Mill. So right now, recently we held a Pennies meeting out at Nation Fort High School. The school district was gracious in working with us for that space. And we had over 150 people, the chamber helped us attend that meeting to provide input on some of the road issues that they have. That was more than all of the other county meetings attendance to date. So we did a really good job in opening that door and working to provide information on what our priorities were, and certainly widening that bypass has to be one of the top priorities. So those, the northern end and the southern end, were the top two. But we're also looking at 4-laning 21, the bypass that runs from the Catawba River Bridge, the newer one, all the way up to Carowinds.
And that's really important because it runs parallel to I-77, and we have unfortunately had incidents where a traffic issue shut down the highway. So you've always got to be thinking about alternate paths for cars and transportation and such. I really appreciate, first of all, your level of communication and transparency with the citizens of Fort Mill and inviting them to hear from their perspective. Because nobody likes to sit in traffic. I mean, we all get just so short on patience when all we want to do is get home and we're waiting and waiting. And it's like, where are all these people coming from? But it's very important because businesses do look at, before deciding to move here, will my employees have a place to live? What will the quality of life look like? And from a tax perspective, it's much better when you work here in Fort Mill.
It is.
We have a hotel now. So hotels are important to the success of a community, of a town. Why?
Well, the dollars that those that come and visit our community spend in accommodations tax oftentimes are spent in the surrounding area where hotels exist. There weren't any in Fort Mill, and certainly we do have needs for families or people that are coming to Carowinds or coming to the Strawberry Festival or coming for the weekend. We want those dollars to stay inside our community. The hospitality dollars are collected at restaurants, and anything that you do in the area, you're paying, you're keeping businesses alive, you're keeping the smaller businesses, that people that live in this community, their jobs. We want those taxes to benefit the community in which they are visiting. So those hotels and those dollars will help us add more to our community, that our quality of life will continue to improve.
And of course, those pennies for progress too. 1 cent sales tax helps fund road improvements. Fort Mill, the town hall, I mean, with all the growth that we're seeing in Fort Mill itself, of course, that is also pushing the limit in the space that you currently have. So tell me what's on the docket for change.
We're very fortunate that we have an eye for repurposing.
We like this.
We like to
Go
repurpose,
green.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And our police department had been operating sincerely new equipment with fingerprinting and DNA. They actually have that equipment in closets. We have people that are sharing desks and working in very tight quarters. We've known that they've needed additional space. We knew that with a growing community, we had to have additional resources within our staff. But the capital improvement plan, we were looking at $9 million to stick build a new town hall. And very fortunately, through some collaborative thinking, we saw that Comporium was going to be leaving a building right in the center of town on Tom Hall Street, had 64 parking spaces. We just feel like we're in heaven. And even though it's not a perfect fit, it's a great fit because we're going to be able to save the community money. We're not going to stick build. We're going to offer enhanced customer service opportunities with drive-through bill payments.
Already there.
With walk-up building permits and zoning. We're going to expand our customer service by moving into that building, along with saving taxpayer dollars and repurposing a building in downtown Fort Mill. I just can't imagine any better solution to that problem.
How much larger is that space from what you currently have?
It's not larger than the entire building if you go from the ground where the police department is up, but it is a little larger than the story that the town administration sits on. We're also going to, in that deal, purchase enough of the peripheral land that in the future we will build an additional annex. So the town council will still meet at town hall for the time being. But those are the sacrifices we are looking at just to make sure we do what's right with the taxpayer dollar.
You're very mindful of the taxpayer dollars. And I think going back a little in history, where you are now, wasn't that the Fort Mill Library?
It was. It was.
I love it.
Repurposing.
Yeah, how about repurposing? Yeah, recycling, repurposing. Yeah, we got it. As it relates to population and residents, what can we look at over the next 5 years? Because really, as it relates to law enforcement and things like that, I would imagine it's a formula For every number of citizens you have, you probably need a certain number of law enforcement officers.
We just had a budget meeting on Saturday, and we're looking at additional officers and additional firemen. Very fortunately, through some creativity and hard work, the town is getting $1 million grant to cover the hiring of some new firemen. We are putting money in building an auxiliary fire station or a second fire station out, hopefully off of the bypass. And we certainly have to plan. Our water and sewer, wastewater treatment facility needs to be expanded. Those things don't happen overnight. You can't just write a check and have it show up the next day. They take as much as 44 months to get it into place. So we do have to have an eye ahead of the curve for what our constituents and our customers need. But I thought it was awfully interesting with the start of school. Here's something that's just an interesting piece for me. Everybody thinks they live in Fort Mill. Well, the town of Fort Mill is 13,000 residents, 13,000. The school year opened with over 14,000 students in the schools. So I think it's really, really important when we're looking at how the town is balancing, providing services, and becoming a vibrant community again. We're looking at taxation of 13,000 residents, not the 30,000 that live in the township.
Right.
So I'm so proud of the community of Fort Mill and the way that they continue to put their shoulder against the wheel and keep pushing. It is certainly growth that brings along some challenges, but they're really good people. Our community, you couldn't ask for a better place to live.
I agree wholeheartedly, and our schools are the best in the nation, and they continue to work and adapt and continue the tradition of excellence. Just so many great things happening. And I think another thing, knowing that council meetings are open to the public, a lot of things that we see when the trees go down have been in the works for sometimes years before the first tree is cut, to make sure that the foundation is in place to handle the growth.
I think that's a really important perspective. 10 years ago when I came on council, one of the largest things that occurred was that the Clear Springs folks approached us about annexing properties that would double the footprint of Fort Mill. And we've seen some pretty large residential developments that have come along since that point in time. When we annexed it, there was no other growth. There was no growth occurring. We were literally on that cusp of, are we going to be this way forever or not? So we annexed, and we're very excited about it. But then it snowballed, and things began happening. Every corner of dirt here seems to have a plan or someone that's interested in it. So I think as we evolve, one of the most important tasks this year is to get our unified development ordinance in place. We're looking at taking all of the ordinances and making them consistent so that when people come to us, we're giving the same answer every time. And it allows our staff to have a little more time to spend on the planning aspects and the balance. Our staff works really hard. And we're very blessed to have business people like Shaw that see fit to invest in our community in a quality way. We're not looking at 10 buildings being thrown up and torn down every 5 years. We're looking at exquisite apartments at the head of Main Street that have just added value to our community.
Or fun projects like down here, where it's renovating the historic structure of the properties. That's a lot of fun.
So we're lucky. We're very lucky.
It is, when you can know the hearts of those that are behind the projects. It's like the bonus program. It really, no matter how big Fort Mill becomes, as long as we maintain relationships and are consistent with that vision, which the vision can change, but the consistency needs to stay the same in terms of what, as you say, is it good for Fort Mill? We're going to be all right. Is there anything that you would like to share that I haven't asked you?
I think that, basically from the standpoint of just being thankful for our business community, because I think a vibrant business community provides for a productive workforce, and that helps every family survive and thrive. We're not just looking at hanging on, we're looking at doing it right. And while there may be challenges and stressors along the way, we certainly still have our eye on the goal of keeping Fort Mill exactly the beautiful community that I grew up in.
Lots of great information today. Thank you so much, my guest, Mayor Savage, Shaw Kuester, and of course our viewers for this edition of Fort Mill Business Today. And before we close, we just want to leave you with some beautiful pictures of Spruce the Caboose. That's right. It was a collaborative effort with the town of Fort Mill, the Fort Mill High School Beta Club, and the Fort Mill Economic Council, getting together to enhance the beauty of Fort Mill even more.
We're here today at Spruce the Caboose, which is a group project between the Fort Mill Economic Council, the Fort Mill High School Beta Club, and Loom Co-working of Fort Mill. We'd also like to thank Sherwin-Williams for their donations, their contributions to the supplies for today. And we're just taking some time today to give TLC to one of our favorite landmarks here in downtown Fort Mill.
And the purpose of the event is to contribute to the town of Fort Mill by actually hands-on work of the caboose, of sprucing the caboose, which is actually the Economic Council's headquarters, technically. It was in need of a paint job. We took the task on, head on, with a lot of help. Thanks to Jen Belk with Loom Co-working. She brought out the Beta Club, and we have a ton of workers out here today. It's been a lot of fun.
It gets the name out in the community, it helps the community and make it a better place for everyone to live, because Fort Mill is honestly one of the best communities in South Carolina, so whatever I can do to help that is always a pleasure.
Yeah, community is definitely a big part of it. I just always want to give back to this community that's made me who I am, and I've been here for so long, like about 9 years now, so I just want to give back.
I take my free time to volunteer because I think it's really important to give back to the community that's done so much to influence me and made me the person that I am. I find that I always find some sort of extra thing that I didn't know about myself or about the community that I get out of it when I volunteer. So I'm just really happy to be here today.
I feel like it's self-rewarding knowing that you're giving back to the community that you grew up in, and it's just good deeds.
I kind of like the sense of pride that it gives me because I grew up in Fort Mill my entire life, so it feels really rewarding to give back to the community that I've grown up in. I would tell younger students to definitely get out there. It definitely looks good on college transcripts, but it also gives you like sense of self-rewarding, and it feels great. It's great that these students are involved today with us. They've already expressed they've had a great time. They've enjoyed a little bit of the history of Fort Mill. They already understand something about it, but we've been talking about what it means to be on the Economic Council, to actually be working on something as important as the caboose, even though people drive by it all the time and don't realize what its importance really is. So they've had a great time doing it with us as well. We would love to have the local population of the area get more involved in downtown Fort Mill, whether it's shopping, whether it's going to have dinner, having a drink, enjoying the parks, buying a dress, buying a shirt for the kids, for the ladies, for the men, all down here now, even the bow ties. So there's plenty to do down here now. We're just, again, trying to contribute to helping downtown improve itself by painting the entrance of the downtown, which is of Main Street, which is the caboose.